Hello everybody, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and welcome to the stream. Today we're going to be looking on the Silmarillion Total War test build at one of our newest factions. In fact, the second to last faction that will be added to the mod. We've come a long way in just about a year and a half. And that would be the Haladin, who are a faction of men who came into Balerion from east over the Blue Mountains, and then inhabited various places throughout Balerion. Once or twice under the, within the territory of the Sons of Feanor, and then later a little bit closer on into Doriath. But before we get started, I just want to say that some of the models that we're using in this actually come from the Last Kingdom mod, which is a medieval 2 mod that, if you're interested in the Viking invasion period of England, then I highly recommend that you guys go and check it out. You can find a link for that down in the description. And so before we get started, I am just going to link our stream in the usual places so we can pull a few extra people in and give people a little bit more time to kind of gather. So if you have any questions about Halidin or about the mod just generally, go ahead, ask me, and I will do my best to answer them. But I will also say, in addition to the Halidin, I am going to show off some of our new legendary companies. One of them is for Angband, so stay tuned for that afterwards. Finally, the Halidin faction reveal. It's good to see you here, Jazz Deep. I know I've been away for a while, but like one of the first people in here, that means a lot. Alright, just give me a few moments, guys. Alright, just be a few more minutes here, and then we can get into showing off the units themselves and answering some questions, because I know people are going to have a lot of them. Would I like to explain what makes this faction special to people that don't know? Absolutely, I would. So let's take a look at their little faction blurb, and then we'll kind of go from there. So the Haladin, as their little thing here indicates, are a faction that fields swift, light infantry with devastating offensive potential, and are masters of the up-close ambush. And in practical terms, you can think of them sort of like a reverse Assyrian. If Assyrian was more inclined to stab you in the face rather than shoot you from the tree line. And some of their main weaknesses are that they are one of these smaller houses of the Adine. They've always been that way. They had a lot of hardships that they suffered throughout the story, which further reduced their numbers. And so that'll be reflected in-game in terms of their unit size, and you'll see that in just a minute here. And they're also quite lightly armored, so the aesthetic we're going for here is sort of like Viking Celts, essentially. So let's take one of everybody, and I'll go through these individually, and then we'll see the models in-game. Now, one thing I would like to say is that they will have 2 different units of chariots that are specialized for a different form of combat. Currently, the one that we have in the game I'll show it off to you. It's not properly textured right now, but it will sort of give you an idea of what it looks like and will give me a chance to talk about the unit conceptually. There will be a second kind of chariot, but that one's not finished yet. I'm just waiting on textures to come in from that. But we do have a really nice model made for us by one of our developers, whose name is White Cloud. So that should be available shortly on previews. You can find us on Instagram, Discord, ModDB, all the usual channels. But let's go through these units here individually. So the first one we have right now is the dismounted Mardrout. I'm not actually sure how I say that, of Maldwin. They are a dismounted version of the Mardrout of Maldwin. One of the important faction sort of things about the Halidin is that they don't really have high-tier infantry. All of their units are mid-tier if they're a foot-bound unit, but their higher-end units tend to either be their legendary companies, their bodyguard, or they are their mounted units, but they do have access to some individual detachments that give them a little bit of extra flexibility. So these guys are a spear javelin hybrid, and when they're mounted, obviously that's very powerful because they pair that with mobility, which is a lot of what the Halidin are about. Ambush, mobility, and very aggressive tactics, but of course you have to be careful to manage your low numbers. So the Mardrout are there just to give you a little bit of extra flexibility on your front line. It does offer some armor-piercing missiles, which the Halidin don't really have a lot of. They do have some javelins. Obviously, they have one detachment of the dismounted javelin cav, and then they've got 2 of the javelin cav that they can take. And then the up-close chariot, the melee chariot that I won't be able to show you today, will have some javelins as well. But for the most part, they don't really have armor-piercing, hand-thrown projectiles. So the Mardrout give them a little bit of that, and a little bit of extra staying power as well. And if you're looking at their stats here, you'll notice that their morale score in particular is very high. So I would expect the Halidin to take casualties very quickly, but they have the fortitude to sort of grin and bear it, as it were. And that's partially for gameplay reasons, but it does also play nicely into their faction background, as the Halidin were very grim, determined folk that faced down annihilation on several different occasions, and they did so standing on their feet. Next, we have a lower tier unit. We have the Warda of Brethil, which I believe is just like Guardsmen of Brethil. Brethil is one of the forested areas in Doriath, I believe, that were inhabited by the Halidin. These units are actually an armor-piercing spear. They have really good melee defense, and not a whole lot of armor, but they can hide anywhere, which is really, really helpful. And again, you're going to see a lot of that across the Halidin faction, where you can set up these up-close ambushes, and you'll have the staying power and the morale scores to actually follow through on them, which I think is some of the is a weakness in other mods that have attempted this sort of faction, where you've got a lot of lower tier units, and yeah, you can hide them, but they're lower tier, they run away, so you end up having to play the same way anyway, keeping everything together instead of spreading it out over a front. So I'm trying to offer that playstyle. We'll see if it ends up working out or not. Next, we have the Brother of Tharkelion. This is more of an upper mid-tier unit, whereas the previous unit was low tier. They are the only Halidin faction that can, or Halidin unit rather, not faction, that can upgrade their armor, so they can pop from 7 to 9. They are technically medium infantry because of the 7 armor score, but they can boost that up to 9, making them well within the heavy infantry score. Sword units within the Halidin are actually relentless units, so they don't have a sort of blocking stagger animation, even though mechanically they are still getting the benefit of those blocking stats and melee defense and so forth. So they're always dealing damage, but they do pay for it with having a little bit lower on the damage side of things. But they can be very, very scary, and this particular unit also has a morale buffing capability built into it. So the Halidin already have very high morale, but when you're pairing multiple Brother on the same line, you've got a 20 morale block, basically, that is always attacking, always trying to deal some damage, and is really only held back by their lower numbers. Next, we have the Ulfadin of Ethel Brandier. They are a Berserker unit, and we're kind of going a different direction with this. This is more of like an experimental look, or an experimental take, I guess, on Berserkers. I had a really good suggestion about giving Berserkers relentless and armor-piercing, all those damage-focused things that you come to expect from them, but also increasing their mass so that they kind of advance into enemy formations, and they're like hacking at people, but they're also putting themselves in danger because they're a Berserker unit. They're not really concerned with their own safety. So that's what we're trying out with these guys. You can see that they're also relentless, and of course they are effective against armor, and they have multiple hit points. They have very, very little armor, and the missile resist there is something that I'm kind of just trying out. Maybe that's something that will make its way into the mod generally, but for now I want sort of a missile resist, which is like a passive invisible shield bonus, uniquely from the front, that sort of mimics the Warhammer missile resist stat. And it doesn't really mess too much with the focus on positional play that we have in Silmarillion Total War. So I thought it might be useful, especially if these units are very, very expensive and quite low in number. I thought that balance-wise that'd be cool, and also adds a little bit of faction flavor. So there you go. That's the Ulfidin. Next we have a dismounted version of another high-tier cavalry unit. These guys are a melee cavalry, well, the mounted unit is a melee cavalry bow hybrid unit. Not a lot of ammunition. And you're going to find that is a trend across all of the Haladin long-range units. Even this little low-tier unit over here only has about 8 ammunition. And these guys have a little bit more because they're the dismounted version, but the mounted version only has 8 as well. And that's because the Haladin really do specialize in that sort of CQB mix-it-up mashup. And so it wouldn't really make sense for them to have a very, very strong range presence with a lot of longevity. They do decent damage, of course, because the Halidin are all about that life, but they don't have a lot of longevity, and of course there's not a lot of numbers on this dismounted unit. The name itself, I'll do this in my very best German, so if you're German out there and you are offended by my pronunciation, well, that sucks. I apologize ahead of time. But they are the Waldschreiter Dragoons, and it means forest strider. It's like an older verb for like to go for a walk. And they are a hide-everywhere unit. I believe they can also hide everywhere on foot, yes indeed. And they are decent enough infantry after the fact. But the Dragoon name, let me just address this. Allow me to go on my usual sort of tangents here. I know people out there are going to be like, hey, wait a second, Dragoons, those are like black powder units from like the Napoleonic era. Yes, I know. But it does accurately encapsulate sort of what the unit is good for. It's like a mounted infantry unit, and the range focus is really just secondary. So I'm trying to make things a little bit more transparent, similarly in Total War, just generally with like stats and everything else. You can see we added relentless to the stat description and stuff like that, and that's just one aspect of that. So I'm trying to encapsulate what the unit does in their names as best as I'm able to. But in any case, the Waldschreiter Dragoons, they're a dismounted version. They add a little bit of a ranged presence, and they're also okay-ish infantry, and you can throw them in as reserve units alongside units like the Sweardebrother, and they'll do just fine. Next, we have the Frey of Brethil, which I can't remember what the name means. I think it's like free men or something. They are a hybrid spear and bow unit. They are mostly skirmishers, so they do use the skirmisher template. They are a lower tier unit, but they can also hide everywhere. They've got a pretty good morale score of 15, and yeah, they pair really nicely with the Ward of Brethil, so you can use them as sort of advanced units to establish sort of like forward positions, and then sort of work around that with a lot of the mobility that the Haladin have. Next, we have the Rigswehr, which I think is like Brave Men of Brethil. This is a sword and unshielded skirmisher unit, sort of. Actually, they're more of a light infantry unit, and because they are swordsmen, with the Haladin, that means they get the relentless trait as well, which isn't indicated in this description, but I will be sure to add that after the stream. So they can do decent amount of damage. Their thing is sort of that they're a low-tier unit that uses mid-tier damage values. They're very squishy without their shield, and they do have access to a projectile. It is a javelin, but as they're not dedicated skirmishers, they don't have the armor piercing. If they did, you would see it indicated right beside the little ammo thing there that says AP, just so you know what unit does what. Next, we have the Huskarlar of Thargelion, and they're a mid-tier infantry / axe thrower unit. Not a lot of defensive values you can see there. 8 skill, nothing to write home about. 6 armor is not amazing, and 7 shield value is just kind of okay. But they have really high charge values, really high base damage values as well, and they have some axes that they can toss at you for a little bit of mid-range punch. Did I get the rest of these guys in there? Good, perfect. Next we have the Skuldmere of Halith, which is Shield Maiden in Old Norse. Pretty well what you would expect from them. They are the legendary company for the Haladin, and they're sort of a different take on the Ulfadin. So the Ulfadin are obviously larger. They've got way less defensive capability with the 2 armor and the 7 skill. The Shield Maidens have 6 armor, 9 skill, and a shield value, which doubles the passive missile resistance of the Ulfadin. They're also not relentless, but they do have the armor piercing of the Berserkers, and they are, in addition, locked morale. But the big thing about this unit is that they have the Throne trait. This is actually the only unit currently in Silmarillion Total War that has access to this, and the Throne trait, what it does is in a nutshell, is allow you to hard counter elephant units. So chariots, Ents, Balrogs, Udurloki, Sauron, all of those kinds of units will fear the Skuldmere. That's just a little bit of unique kind of faction flavor, basically, that if you're facing down units that have a lot of elephants, and you'll probably see more of them because we are looking at actually increasing the base budget price for Silmarillion Total War games from 14k to 14.5k. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does give you more wiggle room. So I'm expecting you'll see a lot more elephants. And so, like the Skuldmere can give the Haladin sort of this unique monster hunting identity that really nobody else has in the game right now. Next, we have the Eduardo of Ethel Brandier. This is the bodyguard tier unit for the Haladin. It's the only one that they have currently. And they are a 1 HP bodyguard. They're a little bit smaller than your average bodyguard unit, which 1 HP bodyguard unit, rather, that tends to weigh in at about 100 men in the unit. These guys have 80. They do have armor-piercing javelins, which is nice. In fact, they're one of the only units that are on foot that have that trait. And they've got axes that they whip out after the fact. So they have very, very high base damage values, very high charge values. However, their skill values pretty low. The shield value of 8 is not bad, and they're the only heavy infantry unit for the Haladin, weighing in at a base armor value of 9. They also have a minor morale buff. Most of the Haladin morale buffing capabilities are not super strong because they already have high morale built into the faction. So I don't want to make them unbreakable, so you're not going to see anything really over +2 in the Haladin faction. Next we have the Mounted Wall Shredder Dragoons. Like I said, they are a bow axe melee cavalry hybrid unit, and they're pretty good. They stack up well enough against other high tier cavalrymen, even elven cavalry, and that's mostly down to their really high base attack value. So bearing that in mind, after they run out of ammunition, because of that high base attack value, they're actually pretty decent off the charge as well. Their big drawback, however, is that they're a super, super squishy unit. They can, however, hide anywhere, so that does help mitigate that just a little bit. Next, we have the Voltschreider Wain Riders. And as I said, there will be 2 Haladin Chariot units. This one is focused mostly on supporting your skirmisher lines, so your lines of Warda of Brethil, and your Freyswear of Brethil, and your Rigswear, and things like that, sort of advanced units. They are particularly good at fighting cavalry, but they are very, very squishy, and they don't have a lot of HP as well. 4 HP sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And the 12 armor, again, sounds like a lot, but for elephant units who are really, really low model and have quite a large hitbox, it actually doesn't amount to too much. So if you guys leave these chariots in close quarters for too long, they do tend to fall apart very quickly, especially against spearmen, and especially against anything that has a bonus against elephants. So in Silmarillion Total War, that's basically anything that's a spear, halberd, or a two-handed weapon. So there's a lot of ways to counter these guys in melee, and they don't have very good attack or charge value, so you don't want to throw them in except as a last resort once they're out of ammunition. Now, it's not really indicated very clearly by the unit card here, which is only temporary. That's just a placeholder brought over from DAC, who gave us permission to use this model, and they'll actually be staffed by some of the dismounted Waldschreider Dragoons. Or I guess they're mounted since they're in a chariot, but you know what I mean. So you'll have like 3 or 4 Waldschreider Dragoons per chariot. Yeah, so it's basically for supporting your skirmish lines and countering cavalry in a very limited capacity. Finally, we have the Mordrout of Maldwyn. They are a spear/javelin hybrid unit. They are pretty good at fighting other cavalrymen, not quite as good as the Waldschreider Dragoons. Obviously, their damage is much, much, much lower. They've only got about 5 damage, and they have a decent enough charge bonus of 10, but really it still pales in comparison to the amount of damage that, against mounts in particular, that the Well-Treaded Dragoons can do. That being said, you're probably going to bring them mostly for their ability to throw javelins. And these guys, the model that uses them, the sort of javelin throwing unit, will be the crew of the second Halidin chariot that's a little bit more focused on melee combat. So, that being said, it's Gondolin. We've seen them already. Let's go ahead and take a look at these units in game. And while we're doing that, well, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in chat here, so I can take some time and answer a few questions. Roster looks great. Love the Celtic and Norse feel. Thank you very much, Joseph. I can't really say that it was anything other than an impulse thing, because I happened to be watching Vikings at the time, and then I got really interested in the time period, and I started doing research, and I'm like, hey, I want a new faction to look like this. But I'm glad that it jives with you. Let's see here. Dragoons have been around for a long time. I like it. See, that's my take on it as well. I did have some people kind of ask questions about it and be like, hey, this seems kind of weird. So I did want to address it. Let me just organize these things here quickly. But I think it does make sense because, yeah, the concept of mounted infantry has been around for basically ever. If you go and read the Conquest of Gaul and Caesar's notes on his conquest of the province, they actually come up against the Germans of Ariovistus, and they would like ride cavalry into battle and then dismount. So it's not like a crazy idea to call them dragoons, and I think it does quite accurately encapsulate what the unit does. So that's why I'm a fan of the name. I guess I brought 2 of each, that's fine. Put the legendary company kind of off on her own, and then the bodyguard can go here. So, let's take a look at the Freyswear here in game. Again, a lot of these models come from the Last Kingdom mod, and we're using them sort of just as placeholders to try and get the Haladin in game so we can start testing them. But this is kind of more or less the aesthetic that we're going to be going for. So again, if you guys haven't really checked out the Last Kingdom mod, I have their stuff in the description, like the link to their ModDB page. Highly recommend it if you're interested in the time period. Anyway, so that's the Freyswear there. You can see they've got those 2-handed spears on their backs to better indicate kind of what they do after the fact. And so if you're a cavalry player and you're running into these guys, at least you have some warning as to what you're getting into. Next here we have the Rigswear. And they'll toss their javelins and then they'll get stuck in combat. They make a really good expendable front line. Again, they're a locked morale unit. There's a lot of locked morale in the Halidin faction. They have a lot of like sticking power, and that's kind of necessary because of the low model count. But you can actually bring these guys in pretty serious numbers, like 5 or 6 of them. So you can have like this very squishy, like paper thin, but nonetheless quite sticky front line. And we've got the Well-Treaded Dragoons. You can kind of see them in action here. Going for that Viking look with those sort of nasal helmets and that like crescent that goes across the eye guards. Then we have the mounted version of them there. We got more of them. One of the other things we were trying to go for is like bright colors as well, which kind of is a little bit incongruous with a faction that's supposed to be all stealthy, but there are some units like the Shield Maidens and like these guys who don't hide that you're going to see some really bright colors on. So that's the Marge out there, and of course their dismounted variant is much the same. They do need to have a spear added to their back, just so you, again, so you have that sort of transparency. You can tell they do at a glance, but yeah. Next we have the Shield Maidens. I'm actually very happy with how these guys turned out. I was given permission from the Reforged team to use their Shield Maiden models, And we did do some modifications on them. Now, it's kind of hard to see because of the angle, but there are actually, like, there's like war paint and like blue woad, like Norse runes on the foreheads of some of the ladies, and they have like little designs and stuff on their cheeks. And then, of course, they have the really, really cool shields here that we've taken from the Last Kingdom. And then there's this particular shield, which brandishes the Haladin's sort of factional crest. And yeah, so they have their throwing axes there, and then they'll whip out axes afterwards once they've expended their ammunition pool. Now, I kind of forgot to fix the helmet on some of these guys. So actually, some of them are getting 2 helmets at once, which is a bit of an oops on my part. I should go back and fix that. But more or less, you get a sense for what these guys are about. They have those big spears that they'll toss, and then once they're out of ammunition, you can get them stuck in with their axes, and they are absolute beasts. My initial testing, I've tested them against some like high-tier Gondolin units, like the House of the Fountain, and they have held their own very well and actually beaten them quite reliably. So it is a really strong bodyguard tier unit, but you are going to pay for it. Don't know if you saw the price tag earlier, but it is quite significant at $12.75. And now this is a unit that I'm actually really excited about. So we have the Ulfadin here, and I've explained a little bit about their functionality, but I'm really excited to see sort of where this goes as a concept, and like maybe we can like bring this into the mod generally for our Berserker units, like the Howlers from Tolan Gauerhoth, for example. Maybe we can do something similar and like have them push forward and like just recklessly like moving into enemy lines. And there are some really cool implications for that. So I've tried them against pike units in particular, and because they're multiple HP and they're not super easy to stop, they can actually push into pike formations with that high mass and get some good kills off. So surprisingly enough, there's like that conventional wisdom, right, that you don't throw your units into the front of pikes. The Ulfadin do really well, and especially against halberds too. Like I tested them out against one unit against a fully upgraded Angband halberd plus legionnaire combination, and they killed 70% of it on their own. So I'm really excited to investigate like new ways that we can kind of shake up the meta a little bit and, you know, subvert your expectations, but in the good way. Let's see now. You have the Huskarlar, and they've got leather. They're more of like a medium infantry, whereas the swordsmen are going to be a little bit more heavy. And they've got that like those like colorful shields. They've actually got, if you look on the back there, you can see they've got like tartan capes, sort of give you more of that like Celtic vibe. And I realize we're mixing Celtic and Viking here, but again, that's what we're trying to go for. And they've got their throwing axes, which can be really painful and great for breaking up charges and messing with people's momentum and stuff like that. So yeah, move on to the low tier Warda of Brethil. They are of course hiding out as they do. Armor piercing spearmen, they're fairly light. They've got about 4 or so armor, which puts them on the upper end of the light infantry scale in terms of armor value, but they are still light units nonetheless. Over here, we have some tweaked Royal Guard models that the Cowering Coma was kind enough to let me use, and these are, of course, the Sweardebrother. And they look really cool. They're the closest thing, I think, that the Haladin have to an open battle unit. Like if you look at some of the other things we've seen so far, they're all very like non-standard. There's a lot of variation. That's very much something that's kind of by design to sort of communicate to you that like the Haladin don't really have a form of military, but these guys are the closest thing that they have, and you take them in tandem with the Dour Warda of Ethel Brandier. They're sort of like the battle-hardened core of the Haladin faction. And I think you're going to see the Sweardebrother a lot because of the utility that they bring, not just with the damage they can do through Relentless, but with the morale buffing capabilities that they have as well. I think we've about done the tour there, so I'm going to leave it on the Sweardebrother, and you guys can check them out, and then I can go ahead and answer a few questions here that anybody might have. Welsh Rider Dragoons, it sounds weird. I guess maybe it does. I did check it out with a native speaker of German. We went over it in Discord for like about an hour, and so I do trust his intuitions as a native speaker that Waldschreiter is at least grammatically correct and not totally like a German speaker's not going to see that and be like, was? You know what I mean? Let's see here. Power of women scares immortal beings. Quite relatable to people's relationships nowadays. Oh, that's a cynical look at relationships. Let's see what else we have here. How are the cavalry units hiding? Very, very carefully. I don't know. It's the hide everywhere thing is just kind of crazy. Like, you'd never be able to do it in an open field like this unless you, like, kick up clouds of dust. It's super gamey, but that's just like a gameplay thing. I am German, that's why I made that comment. Well, I mean, maybe it's like a different take on it. I don't know. But my friend who I ran it by is definitely a German speaker. But if there is something that I can do to improve it, like if it does sound weird, please let me know. Happy to like try and adjust things, but I will like run it by multiple people. Let's see here. Can't wait for Gondolin. We did show off Gondolin a little bit earlier. Castellan is currently working on the House of the Wing textures. You don't know how happy that makes me, honestly. Let's see, what else am I missing? This is a general question. How did I learn to mod a game like Medieval 2 Total War? I ask this because modding seems like wizardry to me and a skill that I would love to learn. It seems like wizardry to me too when I started. Basically, I started helping out like mod teams in minor ways, or like playing with my own like overhauls and like kind of getting a sense for like what I thought was cool and like what I thought would be that other people would also be really interested in playing as well. So one of the first overhauls I ever did was for an old ass mod. I can't remember the name of it, but it was for Vanilla Third Age, and it was like an anti-snowball mod. And so I started doing like visual overhauls for that because I'm like, these units look cool, but like there are some bits that I could bring in that I think would look cooler. So I just started like combining stuff into sort of what I thought would be interesting. There's lots of tutorials online, and I'm always happy to share. Like I'm not like one of the powerhouse modders by any means. Like there's some really, really, really talented people in the community, and they like push things forward in ways that I don't even know how to do. But I am more than happy to sit down with anybody who wants to learn and like share the things that I do know that can get you started, that can like kind of help you, I guess, push like your modding forward in your own little way, right? So if you want to hit me up on Discord, I'm more than happy to sit down with you, talk to you about the sort of like softwares and stuff that you need, because a lot of the tutorials that I used to use on TW Center are either not available or there's parts missing because like they've been hosted on like sites that like don't exist anymore and stuff like that. So if you want to just hit me up on Discord afterwards, I'm pretty easy to find. Just join the Silmarillion Total War Discord and shoot me a message. I like that they don't have a formal appearance. It fits with the men of Brethil. They're often seen as huntsmen and woodsmen in the forests. I like it. Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was trying to go for. Trying to like communicate that they're not. They're a warrior people, but they don't have a formal military. They're not Doriath. They're not the Noldor, right? They're tribes of people just trying to survive. So this, I think, is very much. It is at least communicated in like visually that, you know, that's the Halidin and that's what they're about. Like these are the people that would later become. Some of them I think become the Rohirrim, but some of them become the Pukelmen, the people who help the Rohirrim like get around Mordor's sort of leaguer of the Ramas Ekor and allow the Rohirrim to actually come to the aid of Gondor. Like that's the ancestors of those people that you're going to be seeing and you're going to be playing in Silmarillion Total War. So I think that's pretty cool. Let's see here. I think I've answered most of the questions that were posed while I was going on my big spiel. So if you guys have any additional questions about the Haladin, about Silmarillion Total War, as long as it's not when is X going to come out, then I will do my best to answer them, because I don't have timelines for things. But yeah, so I'll leave stream open for probably another, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, and we'll answer as many questions as we're able to. Oh, right, I also said that I'd look at some of the other LCs, the legendary companies. So why don't I do that while you guys formulate a few questions. So the newest one is actually an Angband legendary company. And those are... Where did my scourges go? Oh, this is embarrassing. Oh, they don't... I haven't added their unit card yet. So we do have a unit card for them. You'll have to wait to see it, but we can at least look at the unit in game and I can talk about them conceptually, which is, I think, the more interesting part of it. thought I was going crazy for a second there. I was looking for the unicard. I thought I added it, but I guess not. And so here we are. We have the Scourges of Gothmog. Now, I think before I talk about this unit and why it will eventually be important, I think it's best to talk a little bit about some of the changes that are coming to Angband in the upcoming patch, which I've informally nicknamed the Nir Nayeth or No the Ad patch, because you'll have, by the end of it, you'll have most of the factions needed to reenact that major battle. So Angband, in multiplayer so far, has been really, really good when it comes to fortressing. And I don't want to take that away from them, because I think that's one of the things that they really have going for them that makes sense with their number-focused and armor-focused gameplay. However, it did become apparent that it was way too hard to break the Angband low tiers. I do want them to sort of be easier to break, so that, like, you have these hordes of works. You have to, like, be careful and wise with how you deploy them and where you put your inspiration units, because they are really, really important for you. And they weren't really important enough. So I don't want to alter their playstyle too much, but you will see a lot of breaking from units. And so this is a unit that is not going to be easy to break at all. And they are also not a sort of, I don't want to say trash tier, because I feel like it says that the units that, like the Iron Shroud units, are bad. They're not. But they're definitely lower quality model to model than the Elven units, which is as it should be. But the Scourges of Gothmog are a little bit atypical in that regard. So they are able to go toe-to-toe with a lot of Elven units. They've got really, really, really high melee defense skill, and their armor is a little bit lower as a result. So you're trading off the armor of Angband, that sort of prototypical, like, Angband orc style of warfare, where, like, you armor up with, like, shields and heavy armor and armor upgrades. These guys forego all of that and instead focus on their skill and on their damage and really high charge bonuses as well. So this is one of the few units in the Angband roster that can actually go toe-to-toe with Elven units and actually hold their own pretty well. They are sort of a variant of the Mace units. I think they're called the Tormentors of the Iron Crown now. And the big choice between the two units is you're trading off armor piercing and the high survivability for higher damage, higher speed, and just more melee staying power. And the lore behind these guys is that they're sort of sub-commanders of a sense that serve under Gothmog, which is why they're the Scourges of Gothmog. They are tormentors. They torture the Noldor within Angband, and that's why they're also armed with that sort of knife, like that sort of like torturer's instrument almost, and they have these blazing brands that are useful both for tormenting people, burning them and such, but also on the battlefield. And it's also a little bit like fantasy craziness that mimics the Balrog weapons, which are also blazing swords. So that's kind of where these guys are coming from. And the person on the team who made these is Skyly. So if you guys are interested in more of his work, you can see them in the Sons of Húrin, which is like a fan favorite unit. But he also has his own mod called Ignia Total War, and you're going to see a ton of his work in there as well. And it's all really, really cool. Highly recommend that you check it out. But that's the Angband LC. Who are we fighting? Guardsmen of the Harp. Let's go trash them, and then I'll look at some questions. They're going to get in there and they're going to hit those Guards of the Harp really, really hard, and they're immediately going to like start dropping like crazy. Which units are supposed to be AP for the Haladin? That would be the Berserker units for sure. So the Ulfadin and the Skuldmere are both armor-piercing units. Where are the Elven building models using this mod from? Are they custom? Basically, all of the stuff that we've ported in for Elven buildings and so forth actually comes from Battlefield Middle-earth 2. So those are things that are free for basically everyone to use, and we've brought them into the mod, and now you can use them in the battle editor, and eventually they'll be used for like custom settlements and IWTE. I'm looking into like learning how to do the kind of stuff that WK does. So hopefully I can use the Elven assets and stuff moving forward in a more interesting way, I guess, than the battle editor. I haven't been with the community so long, so I'm sure you've asked this before, but will there be a single-player campaign in the future? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. It will feature heroes and villains from the books. You're going to see a ton of extra units that you don't have available to you in custom battle. I do want to, just for some of the newer people here like yourself, my philosophy when it comes to multiplayer and single player is that they should be very separate. So multiplayer rosters are very, very focused, very tooled towards giving like faction identity and like making them play in distinct and interesting ways in multiplayer that are different from other factions down the street. Whereas in single player, way more willing to fudge that. You're going to see, and because of the way that our recruitment system will work, and I won't get into that now because that's like a 2-hour conversation, but because of the way that the recruitment system will work in single player, it will be necessary to have those expanded rosters. And so you're going to have more legendary companies, you're going to have heroes, you're going to have just a whole bunch of extra stuff. Hi WK, thanks for joining us. Let's see here. So no more questions for now. I'm going to go take a look at a unit that I've already shown you, but I don't think everyone has seen it yet, and that is the legendary company for the House of Finarfin. So let's take a look at them in all of their glory. And this will actually, I think, respond to your question, Glorfinel, about hero units. Because this one is pulled straight out of the books. For those of you familiar with the Nirnaeth Arnothiad and the Silmarillion, Prince Gwyndor was one of the elves in Orgothrond who prematurely started the battle of the Nirnaeth Arnothiad by charging into the Anfauglith to avenge the death of his brother, who was beheaded as a prisoner before his very eyes. Unhappy chance, he happened to be at the exact spot where his brother was. And Prince Gwyndor and his elves from Orgothrond went berserk, and they charged down into the orcs kickstarting the battle. And so this unit is going to have a lot of flavor based on that. So for example, they may charge without orders.
Units await my orders.
Let's take a look at their stat line there. So it's pretty good. It's like a mid-tier. They're like a mid-tier legendary company, but there's a lot of things that they do well. They cause fear. They have certain terrain bonuses in the snow and things like that. They all may also charge without orders. In addition, they are locked morale, so they will fight to the bitter end, as in their rage and pain, they are unwilling to retreat. And one of the other things that they have going for them is they have a massive charge range. So let's take a look at the unit here. There's a little bit of whiteness around like the transparent areas in the helmet, and that's just something I have to work out by like fixing the alpha channels with the normal textures, which I currently don't know how to do, so I'll have to figure that out. But yeah, that's what the unit looks like. They also bear the sigil of Prince Gwyndor on their cape there. And so, let's give you a demonstration of just like how far these guys will charge from. And they also have an increased charge damage, so it's much higher than your average sword unit. Yeah, look at that. That's really, really high charge, and it gives them a lot of mobility as well. But of course, when it comes to their charge anywhere trait, that can also be a liability. And that's something that I want people to experience when you're using legendary companies. They're not just another bodyguard unit. There's choices. There's drawbacks to the legendary units over other units in the rosters. They're usually like a different variation of a unit that exists. These guys in particular are a variant of the Swordsmen of Talith. They're heavier, they have the charge, the fear, and all that stuff that I just described to you, but they don't have, and they have higher numbers as well, but they don't have missiles, and they are far more expensive. So there's choices to be made there, and they also don't benefit from the price reduction that some of the sword units in the House of Finarfin will be getting. So there's maybe times when you want to take the company of Prince Gwyndor, and there's other times that, like, if you're facing off against lightly armored factions like, say, the Haladin, for example, maybe the missiles are going to be more important to you, because you can get that shock damage, whereas the Haladin are quite capable in melee, and they're probably more than a match for the company of Prince Gwyndor in close quarters. So you're not really going to go as far for the heavier money investment. So there are drawbacks. Let's take a look at questions now. Fits with the grandness of the elves of the first age as opposed to the third age. Thank you. That's basically what we were going for, like ostentatious, sort of cocksure. That's why they've got the bright colors, the golden armor, and like the ostentatious crests and stuff on the top of their helmets. Yeah, that's basically what we were going for. But it doesn't look like we have too many other questions. I will say that there is another legendary company that will be featured eventually. Oh, you can see Turin right here. That's the fellow in the black armor. That's Turin around the time of his primacy in Nargothrond. He's actually wearing a dwarven helmet that he found. And that helmet itself is made out of a dwarf helmet. But yeah, so there will be another legendary company coming. That's going to be for the Easterling factions. It will be Ulfang aligned, and it is going to be a hybrid archer unit, like a foot archer, like a truly dedicated foot archer. I wanted to let them expand a little bit outside of the limitations imposed upon the Easterlings by not having dedicated foot archers. However, I'm not going to erase that weakness entirely, and the Ulfang unit will have its own drawbacks, much the same as the company of Prince Gwyndor and any other legendary company in the mod. So, that being said, I think we've basically covered most things. Oh, we have another question here. How prominently will the 2 dwarven realms of Arid Luin feature in the campaign map? Hard to say, and I'm not 100% sure what you mean by prominently. I can tell you that the dwarves will be a significant power in the region, but I'm not 100% sure because 1, the faction isn't finished, and 2, our campaign isn't finished. So it's harder for me to answer that question. But I would say they'll be at least as prominent as any other faction. Maybe a little bit more so than the Easterlings, especially in the early game.
The enemy army flees the field.
There you go. Managed to rout off the Guardsmen of the Harp. And yes, that is a Gondolin medium infantry unit. And there they go. We can stop them. These guys are pretty fast. And then get that charge bonus off. And they'll basically like start charging immediately, I think. No, I guess not. I guess it works differently for routing units. We got sneak peeks into the units from Gondolin. That we did. I don't have time, unfortunately, to give you another sneak peek at Gondolin, but I will be showing off the units of the House of the Wing and the legendary company, the Phalanx of the King, which will be a pike legendary company once Castellan is finished with them. So, not too sure when I'll be able to do that, but eventually. But yeah, so I think that's basically all I have to show you guys today. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your questions. If you guys have any additional inquiries, you can always hit me up on Discord. I'm not super available lately, just because like exams and stuff are coming up and whatnot. But yeah, I will do my best to get back to you in a reasonable amount of time. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you're excited for what I am calling the fall of Gondolin. There's a lot of cool stuff coming, new legendary companies, new factions, etc., to Silmarillion Total War. And I hope you guys will stick around and join me for whatever comes next. But in any case,